my dear friends. It's great to see you. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general on this channel. I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. And in this episode, we conclude our oral history with an interesting person who is critical for the origin of the role-playing game industry, Ernie Gygax, or Ernest Gary Gygax Jr. Firstborn son of D&D creator Gary Gygax, Ernie was there in the beginning, in the trenches, making the product, playing the games, coming up with rules, and doing the work. And in this episode, we cover a variety of topics: school hijinks, his luck with women, his complete devotion to his new beautiful bride, Miss Donna, a return to the Playboy Club, and the first games of the fantasy supplement to Chainmail, which would later become Dungeons & Dragons and change the world. I hope you enjoy.
Hello, Stephen.
There's my dude. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Oh,
This
it's
is my
beautiful.
Yes, it is. This is my home. Instead of always having it in places where things aren't quite finished, or in my game room, which is really our dining room. Donna really hates it. Looks so much like a game room. So we're a split decision, but when it comes down to it, I should always err on her side. I don't know. Maybe someday we'll build a gaming room and back.
Maybe.
But it
But
sure
also
works now.
good. I also, again, want to say that I like how every time I see you, you look more fit and more hale. That's fantastic.
And I got a good shirt on.
That's pretty metal. So I believe
All right.
my dear
I think
friend, we left off after you'd got done with your stint at the Playboy Club as a shoe shine boy.
At this point, I want to bring up that at the same time as I was shining shoes, I was faking book reports in school, just doing things like the Flintstones cartoon book and other foolishness that I don't even know if I read the whole thing. You know, read half and then last chapter and then do a book report kind of foolishness. And my dad got to, I was trying to get him to let put on a series by Robert E. Howard called Conan. I go, what? You want to read instead of playing a game? And he said, well, yeah, this is really good. This is like playing a game. And he said, you can be a hero in this and, somehow just become immersed in the character. And he was in book 3 in the early part of it. So I said, okay, I'll pick up book 1. And then I picked up book 1 and I didn't stop till book 1 was over, just straight reading. And then I finished all 12, including the Elsbreg de Camp, Fletcher Pratt ending ones. It barely just worked off of a few little lines and stuff of Howard. And I don't think they were as good. But anyway, my dad hadn't finished book 3 yet by then. When it came to book 3, I had to read it around Dad's den where his books were. The other ones I could take away and take to school and all this. So that's what I discovered reading was fundamental because it's wonderful.
Good.
And I'm still living. So at 10 years old, not too much happened. I still had some small stuff at school. One thing is that I wasn't that good a speller yet because when someone was irritating me, I drew a very poor art rendition of him looking like an ape. And I said, you're a baboon and something or other soon. And I used the word balloon. So it still got me, the teacher saw it and then sent me to the principal's office. I went to his office on 2 different occasions. And on this occasion, when he said, oh, that's really not nice to say that someone looks like a balloon, I decided not to incriminate myself further by telling him I just misspelled it. So that was funny. Another school opportunity as I go along is that my 5th grade teacher was Miss Diana. She was just for one class. But that happened to be during the time that we were going out to do like Olympic stuff. So I, of course, wasn't anything at all interested in sports. I did a little bit of baseball. I dropped Little League, only about 5 games. And I liked to play football, but I was nowhere near big enough to be involved. And I didn't have the interest in lifting weights and all that at 10 years old. No interest at all. At that point, as I said, I was with Miss Diana with all the students that were, I think, in her, might have been math class. And we were outside doing our Olympics with all kinds of other people. And so since I didn't have a desire to go running and with hurdles, I basically would run up to the hurdle and then jump. So I wasn't doing it, in a motion, and I was real slow. So then I was going to do a high jump, and I did it with a bar, and I went to do it, and they had a pit dug. And my foot hit the pit. So I went down on my back and hit my head on the ground. So I was a little dizzy and stuff. So I didn't have to do anything more for that. and I got like cuddled by the teacher that was gorgeous. She was a gorgeous redhead and all this. So I'd just say that it was a little bit of a fixation, and it was kind of neat. And everybody else thought she was a horrible witch. But since she would have me, would you do this, Ernie? Would you do that? Oh, sure. I was a little teacher's brat.
That sounds okay, though. You got
That's,
out of some suffering that you didn't want to go through, and you got to be comforted by a beautiful teacher. Oh, darn.
you know what? I wish it would have been a plan. I think God just helps me out a lot. I think I've probably got a horseshoe up my butt because a lot of luck goes my direction. It must be
Good.
facing. I think it's the good luck, if I remember right. Or does it have to face up? I don't know on the barn door, but whatever it's supposed to be, that's the way it's going. So
Now, about the book reading you mentioned, I've got the impression you're a prodigious reader. Am I wrong about that, or do you read a lot?
I have, and I hope to again. Right now, I'm reading a series that's set in the time of Camelot and King Arthur. But right now, the lad is just getting to be called Arthur. He's supposed to be a half-picked. And it's actually a female author that did a trilogy. And I'm not generally a big fan of female authors, but I like to read a little bit of them and give them a couple chapters. And this one hooked me. So it's a treat to see that somehow she can be multicultural or whatever it is, something that would catch fantasy and science fiction men as well as ladies. So,
Sure, yeah.
Andrea Martin did that a little bit, but a lot of her books didn't complete that. And also Margaret St. Clair was another excellent. So in school, from then on, I was doing real book reports, though it was always on books I wanted to read. So it'd be like Guadalcanal Diary, The Deer by Jack Vance, any book by Jack Vance, any book by Howard, any book by Zelazny. I had my dad's wonderful library to feed off of. So I just started reading all of his stuff.
Was it pretty big, your dad's library?
Uh, I would say 500 books or more.
That's a lot.
And then I would also hit the school library. And I could notice that there was another guy, Wayne Targle, that was taking out a lot of the same books as I was. So we became gamers together throughout the years, though now it's not so much. But he still runs a monthly game in Elkhorn, but they do it at the Pizza Ranch. And I can't think of anything less attractive than eating Pizza Ranch food. I don't like soda pop that much, and I certainly don't like just spouting Pepsi Cola or whatever it is, and bad pizza. And they only have vanilla out of anyway, it's just not my standards.
So Pizza Ranch does not get the Ernie Gygax seal of approval. Got it.
Does not, though. Tom Wam and many other gamers say it's all you can eat. And it's like, well, okay, pigs get that too.
You get what you pay for.
Oh, so the only other thing in fifth grade is I had my first little heartthrob, and her
Oh.
name, Teresa Gage. She had some sort of dark features, the blue eyes, if I remember right, could be green. She'd been around always, but somehow I was just coming into some hormones enough to, so I walked around with her. This was probably in a couple days, but I still remember because I was all Twitter pated or, talking from Disney Talk. I took her to some of my secret pathways between buildings and at a fort, that I shared with some other guys. And then I took her to grandmother's house where we got cookies and grape juice.
Yeah. Straight
Well,
sugar.
yeah, when that didn't go very far after a while and she wandered off to her own thing. Years later, I ran into her with a previous fiance when I was sadly involved with using narcotics and things at the time. And the gal goes up to her and says, Ernie says you were his first girlfriend. She says, I was never his girlfriend. I've only liked Dave Twist. And Twist had just died. So she was in her cups. It was in a tavern and was bitter. There's no man for me anymore. So I had to eat crow or whatever, but I said she was, and it was important to me in fifth grade. But to her, it was, well, she was a very attractive girl. So who knows how many dudes fantasized and whatever. But
Well, speaking of young love, did young Miss Ito ever come back into the equation, or was she just baby friend and then she went on?
I'm afraid that ended when I left Chicago to come
Okay.
to Geneva. And now I'm happily engaged and about to be married. So hopefully I'll never have crossing my path with any other lovely ladies from my past. And if so, I have to be able to quickly talk to them and run home and grab Donna.
Smart move.
Yeah, don't lose the best thing in my life.
Smart move. Yeah. Be gone, wench. Be gone.
He wouldn't be evil. It'd just be that I might have less strength than I should when and it's better to know when I've got it good. And also, I'd never want to hurt her. And then if she left me, it would hurt a lot. So again, I'm enamored with this woman. I've been with her for at least 7 years, and it's about time that she makes an honest man out of me.
That's a lot of work.
Well, her girlfriends were telling her, Donna, why are you going to marry him? Why don't you just live with him? They said, you know that anytime you want, you can grab him by the horn. So why do you want to buy the bull?
And
She
what's her
doesn't.
response been?
Yeah, she says that I'm full of caca, and that's not a real story, but I'm sticking to it.
It's a good story.
Just like my dad when he got married with his proposal. He said that he was going out with several girls at the time, but this time he happened with Mary Jo Powell and two other couples. They were walking along in Lake Geneva, and then suddenly the rain starts pouring down. They go underneath a tree. And as they're sitting underneath the tree in the cold a little bit, Mary's hugging on to dad a little bit, and he responds a little bit and, pets her back and all this. It'll be okay. And then a big bolt of lightning strikes a tree nearby, and with the thunder rolling, she jumps up into the air. Dad catches her gallantly, and she says, as she wraps her arms around his neck, she says, "Oh, Gary, do you love me?" And he says, "Well, I suppose." And she says, "Well, you propose, well, I accept." you see, I come from a line of bullshitters.
You come by it honest, huh?
That's
That's good. I like the story. Whether it's true or not, it can be my head canon. I
yeah,
can think it's real.
yeah. Well, again, my mother says quite differently, something about a handkerchief and on his knees and all that. So,
Oh, yeah.
but
What was
dad,
her version?
her version was dad getting on his knee in his suit. He pulled out the handkerchief for his knee and then opened up the ring and proposed to her. And he'd spent, I don't know, several months worth of his pay on this ring. While his pay wasn't great, I think he was a shipping clerk at Kemper Insurance at the time. But yes, that was his story.
And where did
Yeah.
that happen at?
Chicago, I think.
Okay.
Though it could have happened up here when they would be visiting. No, it couldn't because it had to be in Lake Geneva, probably right by 925 Dodge Street, if not at 925 Dodge Street. Because at that time, I guess my mom was living upstairs. She said it was a 3-month romance and then he pushed her. She wasn't all that ready to get married and all this. But he wanted, well, he was smart. He wanted to nail this down.
There you
You gotta
go.
know you got it good, and don't let some other jerk come in there and take your bait off the hook.
And they were all going for it. It didn't matter what age they were, didn't matter what background they were, it didn't matter if they were married or not. They were going for your mom anyway. And
Oh yeah,
so the brothers out there that are waiting too long to ask out a girl or to propose to her, come on, man.
yeah.
Time runs out eventually.
If you feel it, I long ago to Donna, I knew from probably about the first time I met her that this girl could be Mrs. Right. And then I just had to slowly make my pitch. And it was wrong at the time because I was still drinking way too much alcohol.
Mm.
And she told me that, well, I've already had 2 relationships that had too much alcohol involved, and I'm never going back there. She said, that's just not something I can do. But she said, I really enjoy talking to you, and I hope you have a wonderful life. And sometime when you've been sober for a year, you can ask me out again. I quit on March 26th, and that was probably January of 2016. So it took me a while to get out of the damn bottle. It's really tough when I was up to a whole bottle of 100 proof a day bourbon. So, well, it's way too much, obviously. But that was a way of life. And I'd wake up sick if I didn't have my bourbon, and then I'd have to try not to have any and go around not feeling well with regurgitation and, dry heaves and all this, and try to get everything I could get done in my car so that I could then go home and start slamming the sauce. So it was all built around that goddamn addiction, not about real life, love, contact. And people come to me. And then all the time when I'd be watching movies, lots of times I'd pass out in the middle of a movie and have to go back to get into. So, it wasn't all fun and games. It started fun back when I was like 10 years old. And again, 10 years old, Dad took me on we were riding bicycles with him and Tom Rash. And we went to Jane's Bar. And Dad ordered he ordered a tapper, ordered one for Tom. And he said, I'll take 2 tappers. And then, according to Wisconsin law at that time, he took one of those and gave it to me. And as long as it was ordered and given to me by my dad, it was okay. I think that law still applies, but somehow when you become 18, it doesn't until you're 21. I don't know how it was written at the time that people were 18. So I think it was the idea that if you have a younger woman or just, that you can't be bringing her and saucing her up to, have your way.
Right. So, it's totally different if your dad is giving you a little bit of beer versus somebody not related to you. Right. Yeah.
When I was in high school, there was still a law in the books that said whenever you'd come to an intersection with a motor vehicle and you saw a horse-drawn carriage approaching, you were supposed to pull over to the side, disassemble your car as much as possible, take out a lantern and wave it so as not to scare the horse and buggy because they had the right of way. That's just the law never got bothered with because it became, well, basically anachronistic and who cares? But it was still on the books from the ancient days. I like the idea, disassemble your car as much as possible. I guess take off the windshield or something if you have one. Put the hood down, shut it off.
Take the wheels off, take the engine out, and then you just...
They had a lot of problems with wheels in those days because I think they were solid rubber. They would start breaking and just like you see on big trucks with their retreads. So then they would always have at least a spare for that kind of situation. So I'd heard that, I don't know how much, but it could have been hundreds of miles instead of tens of thousands to have to change your tire. And all that. But I mean, in my great grandfather, who was a judge in Elkhorn, it could be great on the Burdick side, he took a sled to Elkhorn, 8-9 miles to do his judging in the winter, with a horse, a sleigh. Wow. So that's how long my family's been around here. Jeez. So I think I've about used up my 10-year-old stuff. Again, like I said, at 10 years old, I made $110 and 6 days of work. And got to hear lots of good music and really see what adults are like when they're not being your parents. And that's what lost me the job because I got to see chicanery and men cheating in particular and just that kind of behavior. And I repeated it to the manager of the Playboy Club, wow, this is, and then he said, you're too young, to my boss.
So young Ernie thought this was exciting, interesting stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. But I wasn't really pubescent. It didn't have the meaning to me that it would have later.
Right. It was an innocent perspective on non-innocent things.
Yes. Purient rather than lustful or whatever.
Yeah. So young Ernie, it might have just been funny or amusing to see this happening, but consequences hadn't sunk in.
The bad behavior of these men and the lady waiting while she's waiting outside, going, in a beautiful dress and shoes. And, oh, it's going to be wonderful. We're going to have a great time and all this kind of thing while he is inside. Oh, I have to stay late at work. Honey, I'm sorry. I'm not going to leave Chicago. I'll be home after work tomorrow kind of thing. And that was like, okay, that's not floating. Because, that's kind of thing I would tell mom. As I said before, when I learned how to steal candy bars, I went right away and bragged to mom. And that's how I got dragged down and get my ass beaten for doing something I shouldn't do. And that worked. I never stole again. Learn to pay for what you get. If I had to lawn mow or whatever, or sell Kool-Aid, we do Kool-Aid stands and we'd sell a bunch of Kool-Aid. And it was mom's sugar. So that was the most expensive thing. The packets of Kool-Aid were a nickel each then without sugar. They were like a dime if you had the sugar ones. So mom would provide the sugar. We'd sell for 3 hours, and then we could go out and buy a whole bunch of soda pops for ourselves because she wouldn't buy us soda. It was too unhealthy. And we'd have to, scrounge on our own.
Now, wait a second. So when you were 10 and your dad and Tom and you went and got beer, weren't y'all still Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, not Tom, but yes, Dad. I don't know if, yes, but there's nothing wrong for drinking. They say drinking in moderation.
Really?
Is
okay.
Fine. They're not Mormons.
Okay, that must have been who I was thinking of. All right,
yeah,
thanks for clarifying.
And Mormons didn't even have soda pop because of the carbonation, I believe. So, or at least that's what I've been told. And when Tracy Hickman worked for us, for a little while, I was supposed to work with him, but that he didn't, he didn't agree. After a while, he said, no, no, no. And then he started working with Margaret, and that went fabulous. I was just supposed to be involved to help or whatever, but it didn't fly because I was young and running around, and he was very much a minister and and that sort of thing. So getting back to the point is that I would learn, but every time I've learned a lesson, it's basically had to be by burning myself, and sharing it with mom. She would always tell us that we couldn't go across the street. Well, I do that and just not let her see. Luckily, I only got in trouble once. I think might have been about 10 again. It could have been 9, where dad had taken us sledding over at the Hillmore area by their 19th hole, their restaurant where they rent all the electric vehicles, the golf carts and caddies. And we got to sled down a couple of hills there, but it was way beyond my boundaries. So anyway, when my sister got this neat girlfriend that I wanted to hang around with a little bit too, I took them both and walked them all the way to our sledding hill. And at some point, mom panicked and called the police because I was gone for way more than the time I was supposed to go get Elisa and bring her home. And instead, she was with this girl. So I took it off a couple more hours. And then I got back to Eastview School, which is the back way from that hill, all the walking. And a cop showed up, and then he put Elisa and I in the car, probably the other girl too, I don't remember. And he took me to my mother, and my mother spanked me in front of the police officer. And had to promise not to go that far again or something. The corporal punishment was the thing, though it was always with your hand or a switch. And later on, it became a leather strap that dad made when he was a shoe repairman. And the strap, since it was more painful, was more a threat. But when it was applied, it stung. So again, I remember how much I would try to, when it switched, I would try to break the switch first so it wouldn't be very good. But then they just make you go get another one. Then with the strap, once or twice, I figured out how to get a thin magazine or something on my bottom in my pants so that it wouldn't hurt as much, but I would still squeal and carry on. So that, not all the time, but if I could, but it would take forethought and knowing that, escaping before you could get your whooping.
But with your mom, it's not that I object to kids getting spanked because I believe kids should be spanked. It's that she keeps doing it in front of people. Like she'll drag you into stores to make sure that managers can see her do it. And now she's doing it in front of the police.
Well, but policemen just thought it was wonderful at the time. That was the 1960s.
You get a good laugh out of that?
He said, I wish parents were more responsible, kind of thing, I believe. I don't know the exact words, but that's the impression I got. At least I wasn't told that I couldn't go walking around or something silly, and I didn't get a fear of policemen. And I still remember his plates were star 1. Okay.
It was a very memorable occasion.
Yes. I have lots of memorable occasions, but they either have to deal with pain, with extreme pleasure, danger, or prime moments with like dad or learning how to read and other things. And finding, as I said in an earlier time, I was in the lowest reading class in 2nd grade. I could have been held back in 1st grade. My mom took a switch and I went up from the lowest grade to the highest grade because she made them give me at school, they made me bring home the toughest book, the toughest class book. And I used to remember there was I would say ta ha ha, switch the. I learned kettle. That was my first big word, Kettle. That's the sort of thing that sticks with you. I've always had a tendency to try to do the least amount of work possible to obtain decent results.
Right.
I've never been someone to go for excellence, unlike Donna, who's about to be my bride. And she works herself to death just because she will not settle for anything. As she would probably say, well, she wouldn't use that word, half-assed. Things have to be to a certain quality standard that she adheres to. So I'm trying to sure that a B is as good as an A if you can do a lot of B's in life instead of a few straight. But
so if at the end of your 10th year, if you're kind of out of stories for yourself there, so how many Gygax kids are there at this point? There's you, I believe Elise.
4. Luke's 11 years younger.
Okay, so Luke's almost about to show up.
Yes. Oh, and when Luke does show up, Mom she's having difficulty with the birth. Not that it's got a lot of labor pains, but they say there's some difficulty because her blood type would fight with dad's. And
Ooh.
I was born yellow, though it's not jaundice. And it didn't do me any harm. But at the time in 1970, when Luke was born, they thought he was going to die, except they had this new thing, which were lights. She had to go to Milwaukee, and it was a 3-day treatment. So as a little baby, he had to be underneath these red lights or whatever they were. And now they have them for cribs you can take home. But this is the earliest time of this kind of stuff saving kids. They would put little sunglasses on the child. So mom, of course, she didn't drive. And dad said, well, we're not paying for a cab and all that. She said, our baby's life. So mom has always been, life is more important than finances or what you have work or anything else. Mom's been a lover of life, and she still does with cats, and she used to with 40 plus horses and all kinds of things. She even saved a steer, and he got to die of old age. He was 10 years plus, and he was like 1.5 tons in weight because they used him for weight guessing at the Bruce County or whatever it was, the city of Bruce, but the county fair. And they weighed him by using a truck. They got the truck empty and the truck with him on it. So
How did she get up to Milwaukee? Did they rent a cab or did Gary drive them?
my Aunt Liz, my mother's sister's husband, Don Ammon, I don't know if he had any kids with my aunt yet, but he accepted my aunt who'd had twins from her very first, very short-lived marriage to a German national who had left Germany to avoid the draft and then went back to Germany when she wouldn't get an abortion, but she was an ex-nun and said, no, 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 no.
Wow.
So, and then she came and lived with my mother when I was just a little guy. So she helped watch me and probably change diapers and all that sort of thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
we don't want to think of that too much.
Oh well, but that's interesting though. I didn't know about that. Well, that German was he was a piece of work, wasn't he?
Well,
And so
he,
Don
he
sounds
made
like a
some,
much better guy.
yes, but Don wasn't very loving. He was very responsible. So to him, accepting a woman with twins meant that he had a lot more expenses and things like this. He counted every quarter and whatever, but he still would spend, but it would have to be, he'd have to understand and she would have to go through him. So, but they did have lots more babies. I'm trying to, boy, I should remember. I think 6 boys total, could be a few more. So anyway, and it should be right off the top of my head. At this point, I really liked Liz, and I remember going across the street when the boys were still infants because she had a garage apartment just across the street behind the Newfer family, so I had to cross Wisconsin Street from 330 Center Street. And we'd be there, and I remember her putting the babies in this kind of yellowish leather or plastic a baby bath, and how neat that was because it only had a few inches of water in it, and how she would work that very carefully to protect her children and all this. And it was fascinating to me. Why do they have such little water? She says, oh, they could easily drown if I didn't, blah, blah, blah. And it was fun. It was fun visiting my aunt.
Did she live with y'all at any point while she was
She was real
between?
in
Okay.
Chicago when I was still an infant. But this was later on. I had to be probably 7 when I started going over there. I'd imagine 7 years old, could be 8. And then at some point, that's when Don met her, dated her, and took on the responsibility and adopted the 2 twins. And then they went on to have many more boys. And just in a nutshell, all the boys are good guys. They're all fairly strong and all this. Like many of them are mighty hunters, though not all. I'm all taught by dad. The only sad thing is that the only girl that my Aunt Liz had was born dead. So they have a grave, and Don's buried right next to it. So yes, all that. Yeah, my Aunt Liz is wonderful, and she's taken me on a couple occasions when I somehow have had issues. Generally, when I was around out on my own, not doing so well. Generally, having to do with drinking too much. Or another time, I had a dog that couldn't go up the stairs anymore to my second floor apartment for a while with an injury. So she let me stay at her house with my dog. She's a very good person. Yes. And she and my mom disagree often, but they talk all the time and visit. So
That's a sibling thing, right?
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Uh, at 13 years old, I got to go back to the Playboy Club and work, but I worked for the same man, but it was as a valet, meaning that I was taking clothes. He'd wash them, and then I would get to deliver them to the rooms with my hand held out, like for tips. So that was at 13.
So this stint of the Playboy Club, how did you get started there?
Gino came to drop off some shoes to be repaired, and Dad was still obviously doing the shoe repair. And I'd gotten my shoe shine job because he'd brought me a good pair of leather shoes. And then he said, I've got some ostrich skin boots if you do this good enough. And I did well enough with the second shine and, doing the edge dressing and all, because we did all that as part of with us. Not only would we stitch up shoes and nail in heels and put on if you wanted to plastic or metal heel plates and toe plates, whatever you wanted. You could have hobnail boots we could put into your shoe if you wanted to, and it would make your shoe last all that much longer. But you would be making a lot of noise everywhere you went, and you'd probably be tearing up floors and things if you weren't just using them for outside. But the Germans had that, if I remember, in World War II.
How long was this stint at the Playboy Club? Was it also short-lived or did it go on longer?
I think it was just till the end of summer.
Okay.
So not longer than a month at the most.
I
And
gotcha.
the tips were nowhere near as good as shoe repair. I did a lot more running around because if you've ever, yeah, you've been to Gary
Yeah.
Con, there's a lot of uneven levels. It's almost like a Frank Lloyd Wright building, the way it matches the contour. So all this is up to this point. And at 13, I also still didn't have it all figured out about girls. But I and a couple other guys would take our bagged lunch and we go up into the dark auditorium balcony. And when it was rainy or wintertime, the seventh grade girls would be doing all their phy ed classes out on the stage. And we'd be eating, and then, there'd be hooting and all this kind of thing. And if somebody started like leaving the stage or a teacher, then we go running off. So, it was, again,
That's pretty
we were
funny.
starting there, but we didn't have it all. And the last thing that I remember being special in seventh and eighth grade was our middle school. I would go there and I and other kids would try to leave something so that the door wouldn't lock properly. And at least on 2 occasions, we got it to work. So then we could run around the halls at night at like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night and just run around. We didn't do any destructive stuff. Except that one time, one of those 2 times, we found the teacher's lounge open and you'd open up this Coke thing, cold container, and this Coke thing had bottles. And they also had a bottle opener available there. So we took and we found straws. We put a couple straws together and we popped several of those bottles open so we could then drink the sodas without buying them. So that was great fun. I think we each did 2. And then so just around that time, might have been the winter of that time, is I believe when Dad would have discovered and helped create. Well, I was with him when we played Chainmail forever. And then Dad started making things like he started having heroic characters that would have histories. You're a Viking chief and you could take 3 hits before you're killed, but they are cumulative. But you can strike like 3 men. Then it was the fantasy supplement where you got to strike like 4 men as a hero or 8 men as a superhero. And the Balrog giant was 12 men equivalent, unless he was fighting against another superhero character. And then it was 2d6 to determine who killed what. And then he did the Chainmail Fantasy Supplement, and that really made Chainmail sell. It was what took it from being one of those small 200 copies of a product that would go around the little circles of wargamers to helping to create a new industry. And Dave Arneson, who's also a big wargamer, took that. And he also, as he was doing that, then he played Bronstein with his buddy. Dave then put it in a dungeon and added the idea of that he would increase your levels when he thought you'd done enough so that you could go to tougher difficulties. He didn't have an experience point system. He just arbitrarily would make decisions about when you're ready to go to the next level of difficulty. And we tried that with him when he came with Dave McGarry, and I was in the game, Rob Kuntz, Terry Kuntz, and my father. And we were all heroes, 4-hit die guys. At some point after adventuring around, we left rope behind us when we were adventuring in this dungeon, and we started tying it together. All of us had rope. And then at some point we felt this big pull on the rope. We're starting to fight back, and Dave says, you're starting to scoot in towards whatever it is stronger than you are. So we let go of the rope, and he made slurping noise and described it as someone taking a long string of spaghetti up into their mouth. We didn't get to see what it was, but it was a gray pudding. I don't know why I'd be strong instead of just dissolving it. But that was the way Dave did this. My dad later on made it a black pudding and modified it. And then there was ochre jellies, and he spun off many things off of that. But Dave gave us a few ideas. Then Dave had the idea of the Balrog from Tolkien. If in hand-to-hand combat, it would probably take multiple hits, but if you caught it in the air, only a magic arrow would hit it. And it was just like chainmail where you needed a 12. I think all of us had a magic arrow, but only Terry Kuntz hit, which means he had to roll a 1 in 36 boxcars, 12. And he did. And so the Balrog plummeted to the earth dead. We were sold. We were sold on this game. And then Dad started working and writing, and within a couple of weeks, he was starting to give Dave all kinds of, this is what I've done so far. And he was experimenting with different rules with us from what he called the fantasy game. And that was, of course, at 13 years old, late 1973.
That wasn't that interesting. Told you that was going to be interesting. I hope you enjoyed this series that we had, this oral history from one of the key figures of the role-playing game hobby from its inception. And while that might be the end of this oral history series, Ernie has told me he does plan on getting into the nitty-gritty and the more controversial aspects of the game industry in those early days, and perhaps even to this day, in another format, either a book or a podcast or something else. So to make sure you don't miss it, I suggest you friend Ernie on Facebook. He's got a couple accounts on there. He'll be glad to see you at either one of them. He's very accessible. He's willing to talk to pretty much anybody. I mean, he did an interview series with me, okay? There's not a whole lot of people that want to be seen around this guy. Or drop by his house in Lake Geneva where you can game with him. I hope you've enjoyed my conversations with Ernie as much as I have. It was an honor to do so, and thank you, Ernie. Thank you for everything you did. Oh, and remember to like, subscribe, share this around so we make sure that the early history of the first family of the role-playing game industry does not get lost. And so, my dear friends, that's all I've got for now. Until next time, I wish you nothing but the best.